So I don't know where the hell my headset went. That's gonna bother me now. That's gonna that's gonna get that's gonna get under my skin. I don't know where the hell they are. Friggin' hell they disappeared too, but it's okay.
Okay, here we are. We're live
All
on
right.
YouTube.
Yeah, it's okay. Until it notifies me, it doesn't really exist anyway. So whatever. Anywho, so that's cool. So
well, good morning, everybody.
hey, good morning. I assume we're on. Are we on?
Yep, we're on.
I'm not notified on it, so apparently we're not. So
We are.
all right. Yeah, so
on.
we'll play a game called What Happened to My Headset, my earpiece, because they're gone.
That's got so much to do with the Civil War.
These ones you gave me are so under par. I mean, I'm not
pretty sure they're dollar store.
Work in such brutal conditions, Mary.
Right.
It's really not notifying me. It's really not notifying me.
Morning, Caleb.
Hey, what's going on, Caleb? I assume you're here because I can't see. Oh, there you go. No, not on. All right. Anyway, so all right, I can see us now, so it's official. It's official.
It's much easier to comment and chat in this one.
I don't really read the comments anyway too much because they go so fast. So what's happening with you? What's going on?
No, not much. I thought we had a good episode about Dahlgren. How about you?
Oh yeah, Dahlgren's cool. I think he's fascinating. I like him. He's one of those guys people know about, but at the same time you kind of don't unless you really get into him.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Morning, morning, Barbara.
Hey, because he was kind of like, he on one hand he was a complete prick. On the other hand, he had the sympathetic attitude towards it. He's a fascinating guy, but also too, the dude's 21 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't imagine a couple of morons like us talking about me 160 years from now.
Oh, 20 God. And just like how young he is. Scott said good morning, and he's looking forward to the trivia on Wednesday. Yes, we're doing our roundtable on Wednesday evening. So 7:30. We're doing it a little bit later just because we have something going on before that. And yeah, we will be doing trivia. Morning, Jacob.
Hey, what's going on, Jacob? What's going on?
In out of trouble?
I don't know. I heard some anatomically incorrect possible activities that he mentioned this morning. I don't know what the hell what's going on. I know Jacob's going on.
Poor Jacob.
No, poor Jacob. Jacob has a kick me sign on, unfortunately. His big brother sometimes gives my hard time. Anyway. Dahlgren was interesting though, because there's a lot of cool people that we bump into along the way with this history thing, and he's one again. And like I started to say before you started to greet everybody, he's 21 years old, and it's tough to imagine 21-year-old Darren doing anything besides trying to drink Old Milwaukee in a parking lot somewhere before, that's pretty much how I rolled. But that's kind of how it is though. And it's interesting to kind of look at that. And then sometimes you fall into that trap of judging people by today's standards. And it happens with all kinds of aspects of this. But Ulrich Dahlgren is a fascinating dude. He just is. And he has a dark side to him, and he down in Goochland, he's somebody who is still enemy number one for Sheridan in the Valley, and in Sherman in Georgia. I mean, Dahlgren, he has that reputation in parts of Goochland County for what he did. Doesn't justify what he did because it creates one of those all-time mysteries of who ordered the code red, who did it. It was a he said, she said. Everyone did the whole Colonel Klink thing.
Yeah, we don't want anything to do with this at all. Good morning, even though Liverpool lost. Morning, Elsie.
Liverpool lost, huh? We got. I know somebody was not going to be too happy today.
Oh, so do I.
He's going to have a tough time. He may fall off his pony. He'll be so upset when he finds out about that.
Poor Gentili. Bill Etzgord's on here. He said, "I fully expect to be talked about 160 years from now. That's what being infamous is all about." Morning, James.
That's true.
Miranda said she's just popping on while she's driving to set up for the parade day. She's gonna listen to the raid episode tomorrow after Crazy's over. Yeah, good luck with that, Miranda. But yeah, getting back to how young Dahlgren is, and just I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that does this, but when I was like, sometimes I think like, wow, I'm the age that so and so was when they did this, and then you get kind of depressed for a while, like, wow, what am I doing with my life? I couldn't imagine being 21 and doing what Dahlgren's doing, but I couldn't imagine being like what any of these guys are doing. I did the same thing when I was the same age when Claiborne was when he died, and I was like, what the hell, his life ended when he was this age, and I feel like I haven't been around for that long.
Well, you forget the age of these guys, how young these guys are. And I remember you think about I look at, I just want to think of Gettysburg. And Little Round Top, Patty O'Rourke, he's a class of 1861 at West Point. 61. That's how young these guys are. Rufus Dawes, we treat 23, 24 years old when he raised that railroad cut.
Yeah.
Even the generals. I mean, the one I like to talk about is Henry Baxter from Robinson's division. He's 45 years old. He looks like he's 60.
Yeah.
Google a picture of Henry Baxter. Look at that guy. That was taken during the war, and tell me he's 45 years old.
Yeah.
That's what war does to these people.
Well, yeah, you see it with Lincoln, how much Lincoln aged during the war and all that. But these guys are doing stuff that there's no, it's kind of like, holy shit, Howard is the youngest corps commander at Gettysburg. I think he's 32 or 33 when he's put in charge of the field after Reynolds dies. So that means he's 34 in the March to the Sea. These guys are really, really young. Dahlgren was the one that got me, though, because it seemed like he'd already lived a full life with all that he'd done. This is a guy that's at Second Bull Run. He's put in charge, he's kind of the de facto guy in charge of the 11th Corps artillery at 2nd Manassas. He's at Fredericksburg, where he and 60 other guys go in and they actually take the town for a while, and they take, I think it's 30 Confederate prisoners.
Yeah.
What was his role? Did he really have much? I don't think he had much of a role at Chancellorsville.
No. He basically was an aide de camp to Hooker.
Yeah.
At that point in his division, so he did a lot of stuff, but he had that initiative. He wanted to do more. He was young, he was brash and all that. So he gets involved in the cavalry there, and he gets involved with Buford and starts riding around. It's very similar to John Mosby, how he ended up with Jeb Stuart, how he just ended up in that type of situation. And then what does he do? He ends up catching those plans on the 2nd of July, that report that Lee's not sending more people to Gettysburg. This is it, which is valuable intel. He does, he loses his leg. He gets shot at the Battle of Hagerstown on the 6th of July in the retreat.
Yeah.
And his leg, by all accounts, is kind of hanging there. They don't amputate it right away.
Yeah, that's brutal.
He goes back to Washington, his leg. They talk about the gangrene, the smell of his pus on his leg.
I can imagine some of the shit that they went
through.
So,
so the whole walk it off thing wasn't working. So they actually took his leg off. And it's amazing, and the story of his leg's a fun one too. Sickles isn't the only guy with his leg famous in the Washington area. They put his box in an iron box and buried it. And then when they went to tear down the building where it was outside where it was buried and put a parking lot, and they looked for it and it was gone.
Yeah.
So they said, screw it. They put the parking garage there. Somewhere there's an iron box with Dahlgren's legs somewhere on property that they can't find. Although there's a marker on the wall. If you go down there by the Navy Yard, you'll see a marker that says Ulrich Dahlgren's body is buried somewhere in this area, and they never found it. So who knows? Who knows?
Very, very interesting. Morning,
maybe,
Steve. Good morning, Lisa.
Maybe Ulrich's leg and Sickles' foot ran off together. And that's the end of it. So who knows?
Weird. But, Andrea AQ's on here. Andrea Quinn. She said, then there were those that died of the wounds they suffered years after receiving them, like Chamberlain. I don't think Chamberlain's the only one that happened to, but Chamberlain suffered for a lot of years from those wounds. John Bell Hood is another one.
We were talking about John Clifford Robinson, Gabriel Paul. He got shot in the temple at Gettysburg, and he lived exactly 8,300 days. And he died. He had seizures every day. When he was blind, he couldn't smell. So he lived, obviously, Chamberlain, 1914, he finally dies from his wound. But that's why they don't know how many people died in the Civil War. They say 640,000, but it's probably at least 750.
Yeah, they say it's more.
You don't know who the hell, when you stop counting, really. So, but the Gabriel Paul one's the one that that always got to me, because he lived a long time with that in complete blindness. And that having seizures five times a day. Screw that.
That's terrible. And you got to wonder too, there's the invisible wounds as well, like the PTSD that, somebody like Rufus Dawes had, Rosecrans probably had it too. And like that, they're all going through this stuff after the war. And it's no wonder with some of the stuff that they went through. Andrea mentions my poor Barlow too died in 1896 from Bright's disease attributed to his Antietam wound.
I mean, not to mention,
forgot Barlow was wounded at Antietam.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about that.
But you think about even the suicides after the
Yeah.
war from PT. I mean, you can attribute them to all of them. That's the thing about this is that you sometimes Ken Burns did a lot of good things. He did a lot of bad things with this video because he quantifies things, and
Yeah.
really there's no way you could possibly count.
No, we can never know exactly what they went through. You have like terrible things happening all over the place, especially near the end of the war. It seems to get worse and worse and worse as the desperation on both sides to end it. But then
that is a good segue into the Dahlgren raid, Mary.
Yes.
The desperation of February of 1864, 3 years into the war, things aren't going too well. Lincoln's losing his mind. He's got the election coming up. He's got the Copperheads of the North bitching. They can't seem to get any traction. You got some success in the West that's slowly inching. You've got, Lee getting slowly, pushed back after Gettysburg and some things that happened there. But pre-Overland campaign, this is why this plan, this Dahlgren raid from Judson Kilpatrick, probably as silly as it was, probably he got Lincoln at the right time because he would have taken any port in a storm at that point. And I mean, he would have been. And so when Kilpatrick shows up, and Kilpatrick's coming off of the Elon Farnsworth fiasco, which he caught a lot of shit for on July 3rd at Gettysburg, he's looking to redeem himself. So he got this plan where he's going to take 3,500 guys, exactly 3,584 to be exact, and they're going to go liberate Belle Isle, which is a 45-acre prison south of Richmond, and then Libby, which is right downtown. And somehow he's going to get there. He's going to take them all away. He's going to put them on a big magic carpet and fly them all home, be a hero. And it's going to galvanize the North, and it's going to screw the South, and Jefferson Davis is going to get pissed off. And the problem with that plan is that it doesn't take a military genius to sit there and think this makes no freaking sense.
Well, that's what gets me. Is it looks great on paper, but like I said in the episode, if I'm a prisoner at Belle Isle, there's a chance I'm probably not feeling the greatest. There's a chance I'm sick. Some guy comes to break me out and I'm like, yay, I'm free. And then he's like, oh, by the way, we're going to go and sack Richmond and you guys are going to help us with this. I would have pulled out my Epis card and been like, no,
that's why when they find the plans in Dahlgren's handwriting that talks about a much sinister plan, was the raid on the prisons nothing more than a farce for Lincoln to approve this raid. And the problem is we'll never know because someone named Edwin Stanton burned all the papers. So when Franz Lieber, he is a guy who's in charge, he's in the Union Army. After the war, he's in charge basically gathering all the Confederate documents and bringing them back to Washington. That's kind of his job. Well, Stanton's going to go to Lieber. He's going to say, hey, go get me everything you can find on the Ulrich Dahlgren raid. And of course he does. He brings them back to Stanton and they're never seen again to this day.
Yep.
So
just like the John Wilkes Booth photograph, like autopsy photo, right? Things disappear when they fall into Stanton's hands.
Right. And they probably ended up in the fireplace,
Yep.
Realistically, but that's what happens. So it's fun to speculate, and sometimes the people get all pissed at the what if game. But that's the way it is, right? So if you just think about it, is it so inconceivable to think that since Kilpatrick met with Stanton in Dahlgren, and would he have been the one who did call that code red, to use the movie sit in there, to sit there and say, we want you to go down there and we're going to tell Lincoln, because Stanton, don't forget, he hated Lincoln, thought Lincoln was soft, had really no respect for him. Would he be the type of guy who would say, we want you to go down there with Kilpatrick and we want you to go kill the cabinet and go kill Davis and burn Richmond? There's a reason why, that Dahlgren was loaded to the gills with torpedoes.
Mm-hmm.
He had this fabric called oakum. It's kind of like a hemp that burns really quick. And he had a bunch of turpentine. So he clearly he had to burn the Dover Steam Mill, but he clearly had enough to burn a lot. He did. Yeah. So who knows? Because when you think of the inconceivability of how he's going to get 13,000 people who are all sick and injured out of Belle Isle. Belle Isle's got one road in, one road out. How are you going to pull that off? it's easy to surmise what the real plan was. And Dahlgren, he was a type of guy who probably could have been the right guy to do it because he was crazy. He was.
Yeah.
He wanted to make a name for himself. He had that crazy cavalry, I don't want to say paranoid attitude, but the fella had some issues there. Let's be honest.
Oh yeah, he did. And I mean, so did Kilpatrick, but not, I think, not to the same extent as Dahlgren, but Kilpatrick is very much looking for redemption. He's also it's hard to keep Kilpatrick reined in. And I think the only person that was able to do that with somewhat success was Sherman, because like after, and this is another thing about, oh yeah, there's a question here. Jason wondered, didn't Stanton burn a lot of Booth's diary? I think allegedly he's said to be the one that might have burnt it.
I mean, well, it depends on who you read. If you read the Eisenschimmel book, he burned everything from his birth certificate to his first grade picture,
Yeah.
But no one really knows. And that's the thing, is people a lot of times is when you read some of these books, right? If the Eisenschimmel book is a book about the Lincoln assassination that basically tries to tie it all to Stanton, where he was the guy twisting his mustache behind the whole thing. And it's very loose with the facts. He also blames the Catholic Church for it. There's a lot that he does. But in that book, he talks about Stanton getting all this stuff and burning everything. The fact of the matter is no one knows. No one really knows. That's why that book isn't really held in high regards up there with some of the other books about the Lincoln assassination. But it's a theory, and there's no reason to think he's wrong. But that's
it's just one of those theories. I personally think Stanton was burning a lot of stuff because he wanted to eventually one day run for president. Yeah. And I think he was trying to get rid of a lot of those potential skeletons in the closet, because I mean the political shit back then was the same as it is today. There's a lot of mudslinging going on. And that would have been no different than him. But Stanton passes away. I think he has I don't know, almost like, it's not tuberculosis, but it's like some kind of like heart or lung issues or something like that. I mean, I personally do not like Stanton.
You barely know the fella. No, he was. I don't. Stanton. If anybody who's seen the movie Dave, the comedy movie with the guy who ironically played Stanton in the in the movie about Mary Surratt, there, he reminds me of that guy who was kind of pulling the strings in the movie Dave, right? Yeah. Frank Langella's character. That's kind of who he reminds me of in the Lincoln White House. The one, he had no respect for the president. He felt he was the one making all the choices. The problem is he had that dick measuring contest with Henry Halleck. Right. And so they were going back and forth with it. But whenever I see that movie, Dave, I always think of Stanton, because that's how I imagine in my head how it would have been.
That's exactly how he was. I think he had calmed down a little bit unfortunately, by the time Lincoln was assassinated, he'd come to respect Lincoln even more. I mean, Lincoln making him Secretary of War, I think, was a good decision, because he had that kind of, I don't know, Stanton was okay at it. I don't know who else could have done it. I mean, my favorite cabinet member is I really like Gideon Wells, and as much of a shit show as he is, Blair, I like him too. And then when he brings in James Speed to be Postmaster General, those are the ones I like on the cabinet. And Seward.
I was going to say, you're not
even though Seward's kind of, I mean, he finally gets put in his place.
Come on, he dresses in kimonos and hangs out and smokes pipes. Come on, he's my spiritual animal.
That was like, and now we're going to take this from the collection from the Orient that I picked up when I was over there, my big yellow housecoat.
Come on, nothing wrong with that. But I think there's a lot of gray area and dark corners and skeletons in Stan's closet. And the problem is he dies young. And ironically, him getting fired by Andrew Johnson is why Johnson got his ass impeached. So he kind of stuck around. He found a way to stick around.
I think he fought his way through it. But yeah, he does burn a lot of stuff. Very ambitious. Caleb says Stanton didn't think Lincoln was the right man for the job, and he was.
No one did though.
I do agree with that. And if you look at the way, like if you go back to the trial that Lincoln was asked to be part of in Cincinnati, which Stanton was also part of, that is where the comment, the original guerrilla, comes from. It was actually Stanton that said that first, not McClellan. But Stanton he's a fucking bully to him in Cincinnati. The lawyers completely ignore Lincoln, even though Lincoln has written up his part of the case. Lincoln, to his credit, still goes to the trial, and they all ignore him, And then this is a guy that, Lincoln, even though this has happened, he's like, well, I guess I'll make him part of my cabinet because, the book Team of Rivals, that's what's that is about, is this how he's making his rivals. But I don't think I think the big rivalry was between Stanton and Lincoln, and then Lincoln and Seward for a time being, but then the two of them became very close.
No, I mean, you give Lincoln credit because he did put his cabinet together people who really didn't like him, who didn't think he was any good. And I can't think of any modern presidents nowadays who would do that. No. They for the most part want yes men and push their own initiatives, but he did that, but they didn't respect him. I mean, half the country, he didn't win one southern state. He only got elected with 39% of the vote, and he didn't. And it was only because the Democratic Party split north and south, and they had Bell and Douglas, and that's how he got it. He kind of got it on a technicality, and he wasn't considered legitimate by a lot of people. Depending on some people on Twitter, he still was never a legitimate president, depending on who you look at.
Oh, history, Twitter.
Ain't that right, Missy?
Oh, that whole thing. Bad takes on Twitter for history on both sides of the war, I might add.
But the reality is he was somebody who he was the president, but the Stantons, the Hallecks of the world felt that he could be controlled, and especially Stanton. So it's not hard to imagine rather, that he was pulling these raids off. Now, if you believe the narrative, the Kilpatrick narrative, the Dahlgren family narrative, by all accounts, Kilpatrick did go to Lincoln February 1st, 64, with this plan to take them out. Lincoln probably was like, okay, you do you.
Yeah.
But the fact that Kilpatrick never went to his boss, Albert Pleasanton, with the plan, never went to his boss's boss, George Meade, with the plan, went right to the president's.
I honestly wouldn't go to Pleasanton either.
But you know what? The fact that Lincoln didn't say to Kilpatrick, get your ass out of here, go talk to Pleasanton, go off the chain of command like you're supposed to. It does say a lot about Lincoln, though, and his mindset at the time. Stanton was like, okay, if he probably loved the plan, but he says, you know what, Lincoln approved it. If this thing blows up in my face, it's on him, not me. So go ahead and do it. And that's kind of what Meade did. Yep. Meade said, for the most part, I don't give a shit what you do. Just be home when the streetlights come on. I don't care what you do, because you've already got. I think it's stupid. And it would not be this first time a cavalry guy dicked him over. When we talked about Sheridan,
Sheridan
Yellow
does
Tavern
the same thing. Yeah, Sheridan does the same thing.
So
Yellow Tavern ends up being a little bit more successful though than Dahlgren's, right?
No, it does. But when you look at the plan, if Dahlgren survives and he gets pushed back like Kilpatrick did after Easy's militia pushed him out of Virginia, then this story is a footnote, because there's a million little raids that happened that went nowhere. But if they don't find the assassination letter on him, you look back on this and wonder, what they were thinking about authorizing this plan. Because this plan had no chance of success. This is like in Cleveland Indians in the preseason. You got no chance. You just don't know it.
We're going to go all the way this year.
But hope springs eternal, right? But that's kind of how it is. But I think it shows a mindset of Lincoln at the time that, you know what, this is stupid, but it might work, so go for it. I need points. But the whole thing goes off the wagon pretty quickly.
Yeah,
because Kilpatrick screws up almost on day one.
Shocker.
Well, I mean, he does, but the problem with Kilpatrick is that he's going to go through Spotsylvania. He's going to head right down. He's going to make it. He's going to go 60 miles in 35 hours. That's how fast he's moving. But he hits that 2,000-man militia front of those boys and those old men under Easy, Easy Jones there. And he gets pushed back because Wade Hampton is going to chase him out. But Dahlgren doesn't know that Kilpatrick is done. So the plan starts with 3,584 men, 3,000 of which are with Kilpatrick, 584 are with Dahlgren. All of a sudden, 3,000 are off the dance floor. They're gone. Yeah. Now you got Dahlgren, who's going through the woods in the muck, who's going to come from the southwest into Richmond, and he does not know that Kilpatrick's gone, which means he's going by himself at this. He's invading Richmond with 500 guys.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of what happened with we briefly touched on it, but kind of with and you said kind of like Iuka, where there's a communication breakdown. But another cavalry one that this is like was with Soy Smith, where Soy Smith didn't let Sherman know what the hell was going on. That one raid they had to do.
You can draw correlation with William Soy Smith and Meridian with this one because they're young guys who can't help themselves by blowing shit up.
But Stewie Smith never should have been a cavalry guy.
No, but there's a huge difference. Stewie Smith's going up against David Bedford Forrest for one.
Yeah,
that's a big thing, versus Dahlgren's going up against, he doesn't even know what's going up. He's going against Easy's militia.
Yeah.
So it's a night and day. It's an apples and oranges thing, but they both can't help themselves. When you start getting into Goochland, he starts seeing those plantations. There are 3 plantations all within about a mile of each other.
Yeah.
And he's going to start trying to raid them. And he's going to start, like we say, doing cavalry things. He's
such a brilliant,
he's burning stuff. He's raiding plantations. But what I have to do, it's costing him time. And while he's dicking around, having his men try on women's clothes and dance around over James Morrison's mansion, and they steal all the women's clothes and start dancing around, having a tea party, and then it starts to rain, and then the rain floods the James River, and they can't get across. So you wonder if a Buford were in charge of this, or a Run DMG, Dave McMurtry Gregg, if this could have been pulled off, but he wasn't the guy to do it. He wasn't the guy.
They weren't. They would have been like, no, this is a crazy plan. But I mean, like I was saying before a little while ago, this is something that, Kilpatrick is Kilpatrick. He's kind of like his own problem. He's got the thing with Elon Farnsworth and Gettysburg, and then he's got this on him. But they don't want to get rid of him because he's kind of good. So they send him, which is this seems to be. What was that phase for?
That's a sour beer. It's too early for a sour.
Oh, God. Anyway, so what do you do when someone kind of screws up, but you don't want to get rid of them? You send them to the land of misfit toys, the Western Theater. So he goes out there, and I think this is one of those things like what we talked about last week when we talked about Robert Smalls, that because of what happened with Smalls, Pemberton gets sent to Vicksburg. I think partly because of what happens with the Dahlgren raid and the Dahlgren affair, they've got to do something with Kilpatrick. So they're like, you go to the Western Theater where we won't hear about you as much. Right. But because of that, he ends up being Sherman's cavalry guy on the March to the Sea, which I know some people are kind of like, what the hell? But I think Kilpatrick was the right guy for it.
He's a guy you wind up and let him go. He's a fighter. He's a soldier. What Sherman knew. And that's what he was. He's not a thinking man's cavalry commander. Oh. Although he did a good job on the retreat. We'll give him credit for that.
Yep.
He did a good job, chasing down, going to Monterey Pass and doing that whole thing. He did very well with that. He did fight Alfred Iverson at Hagerstown, and by all accounts, he did pretty well with that. But he's not a thinking man's guy.
No.
So you've got a couple of rogues, a couple of, I don't want to say inexperienced, but people who don't have experience running real campaigns invading Richmond. I mean, that's fine. But that's the reality of what happened. And so it's one of the, I think it more shows on the mentality of Washington at this time. Now, we were talking about Stanton and all the stuff going on with Stanton. I don't think he was involved in the Lincoln assassination, like Eisenschitz says.
No,
but he gets everything thrown at him because of who he is. He doesn't live long enough to defend himself. Right?
No, that's the thing. He's Jason put a quote in here from historian Goodwin: "Implacable and abrasive as Stanton could be, his scrupulous honesty, energy, and determination were invaluable to Lincoln." And I do think those are the qualities that Lincoln.
Well, he was the invisible hand in the White House who guided him. Lincoln didn't always take his advice, but he was a guy who I don't want to say the adult in the room because it's an insult to Lincoln, but he was the experienced guy who was there at Lincoln's side for the most part. Halleck was in the Western Theater for a while when he was commanding the army out there till he came. But Stanton was the steady Eddie. But what Stanton wanted is usually what happened for the most part. He did. And he helped coordinate a lot of stuff. He did a lot with the assault on Fort Fisher, Battle of Wilmington. A lot of that is Stanton's fingerprints all over it. So you wonder if he thought an assassination plot would end the war, which I can only imagine what the hell that would have meant. That would still be
my God.
Right. But if Stanton felt that was he probably, I don't know. I would love to be a fly on the wall in that February 1st meeting with Lincoln with them to find out with where it all kind of where it went when someone said, hey, here's an idea. What
Yeah.
if? Because the problem with that is what would have happened if they did it? Nothing good.
No.
I mean, you talk about there were 12 terrorist plots from the South against the North from that point. And no one knows for sure if it generated with this Dahlgren affair.
I think it probably was something that triggered it because you see them a definite uptick in them.
Well, the gloves are definitely off. I mean, it was still war. It wasn't a pillow fight anyway. But I mean, it led to the smallpox blanket fiasco, everything going up in Montreal. And there are people who think that it was the genesis of the Lincoln assassination with John Wilkes Booth. There really isn't any evidence tying the two, but there are people who think that maybe that doesn't happen if Dahlgren's raid doesn't happen. I mean, that's kind of a reach, but there are people who think that, but you never know.
Yeah. David's on here. He said he's late. He's in North Carolina for a wedding this weekend.
Oh, North Carolina's great. North Carolina, I don't know if I'm sure he knows this, but the Carolina Panthers had the first overall pick in the draft in the NFL. I don't know what the hell they're thinking. That was a disastrous trade for them. Sorry, Jacob, but that's a bad one right there. But the thing about it though is it does the Civil War does change on the dime on many, many points. And this is one that it seems like it should be a bigger deal. But I think because the Overland campaign had started later that year, it took a lot of the energy and that steam away from the Dahlgren affair. But it was a big deal.
Yeah, I think too, just some of the stuff that happens because it does not look good on the administration in Washington. Meade has to write Lee and be like, this is not us. Personally write Lee and tell him basically, this is not us. I had nothing to do with it.
Doesn't that sound
PR?
A lot like Jefferson Davis telling the country they had nothing to do with the Lincoln assassination too.
Oh, big time.
No, I don't think they did, but I'm saying that it's interesting. You have two sides writing to each other saying, doing the whole Shaggy, it wasn't me, right? That's kind of how it was. But that's a big deal though. And, Meade was called the whole thing an embarrassment when he wrote to his wife. He had to write that apology letter to saying we didn't freaking do it to Robert E. Lee. But that spurred a lot. It really, really did. I don't think people, at least on this part of the country, like to talk about that because it's not it doesn't look good. I mean, it doesn't, but it's important to study though. That's why you got to study both sides of this.
Exactly. It's important to study both sides. Caleb has an off-topic question. He's headed to Mobile, Alabama next week, and he's going to research any Civil War related sites, but he wanted to see if anybody had any suggestions for him.
It's Mobile, Alabama.
Mobile. I'm
first
Canadian.
of all.
Whatever.
But you can check that. You can go down to where the port was closed down there. That's a pretty cool area. That was one of the biggest Confederate. That one fell right before Wilmington did, and that closed off the blockade. So there's a lot of cool stuff. I've not been to Alabama, Italy, but there's a lot. I hear there's a lot of cool
Bragg.
stuff.
Frank just mentioned Bragg's buried there.
Yeah, you can go see him.
One of the greatest generals, Bragg.
Maybe you can go find Dahlgren's leg. Maybe that's where it is.
Maybe he's and Frank mentions that Lincoln was in danger of assassination ever since his inauguration, even before that, because the Baltimore thing, right?
Yeah, I mean,
sneak him.
There's no doubt about that. He had to dress up, and they had to sneak him in town. He dressed up in a leather jacket and a hat. It was like a Fonz when he snuck into town.
Hey. Can't get that image out of my head now. But yeah, as you say, like you have to study in everything. You have to study both sides of the war, and you have to be able to be objective about it. Whether you lean to the North, like, I mean, I'm Union, but I have no problem studying somebody like Patrick Cleburne, it's just but you have to do it objectively. And
speaking of you, Mayor, with Patrick Cleburne, we got to talk about that ugly incident in your social media where you once again, little Mary steps in it left and right on social media with Patrick Cleburne. And I'll be honest, and sometimes I just read it. You have to stand in awe of the factual inconsistencies and just wrong shit that ended up on that thread. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, Franklin. I mean, the whole thing was basically, like said, Franklin was a Cleburne's fiance Sue Tarleton's buried there too. I'll have to go see her sometime.
Well, I'm gonna say goodbye to this one finally.
Yeah. God. You finished it. Good for you. But you know, there was a bit of talk about Franklin and how it was very dumb, and that Claiborne participated in, like, you know, kind of this dumb charge, but Claiborne had no choice. He's having to follow orders. And the backstory, you know, Claiborne was one of the ones that basically told Hood, I don't think this is a good idea.
Wow.
And, you know, the morning of November 30th, he has a conversation with one of his staff, Mangum, and he says, you know I'm being blamed. This isn't fair. Claiborne puts it back on Hood, saying Hood was inspecting the lines that day. He was getting reports throughout the night. Why am I the one being blamed for them sneaking by Spring Hill? And then Caleb said, we rebels are a little salty about Franklin still. I think everybody's salty about Franklin.
No, but you know, I mean,
tragic.
You know as well.
Yep.
People who listen to this, you and I are both big fans of Patrick Claiborne.
Yep.
Okay, we are, and I've said this before. I'll say it again, that he's the best the Confederates had. I think he is. I think he's somebody who, if he stayed in Ohio, would have been a fantastic Union general. Yes. But I think he went to Helena, Arkansas, and fought for the South, and he fought the best he could. But that Franklin thing, it was a situation of compounding mistake after mistake. You get pants at Spring Hill by Schofield.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, but you know what though? You got to give Schofield credit too. You do.
Yep. Absolutely.
It isn't just like, you know, Hood falling asleep at the switch here. He did pull it off. Now Franklin is a disaster, but you have to fight, but then doubling down on it by going to Nashville in the snow and fighting and getting your Army of Tennessee destroyed. Yeah. It just compounds one mistake after mistake. But that doesn't mean that Claiborne irresponsibly charged Opdyke at Franklin on his own, like he's some kind of John Rambo here.
He had no choice.
This is a dude who had orders, who, you know, and he felt he was blamed because of Spring Hill. And he probably, you know, like Michael Jordan, you know, and I took that personally. And he was going to go ahead and he was going to attack. But let's not pretend that Patrick Claiborne woke up one day and decided to take his army and charge Opdyke and get slaughtered.
He didn't want to, as he's, I have this book here, which I'm trying to get it to be in focus on the camera, and it won't. But it's called The 1864 Tennessee Campaign, Volume 2, and it's the last days in the life and death of, like, Patrick Claiborne. Caleb said Claiborne did his duty. He knew what his job was, and he was a great man. That's it. Claiborne, one of the quotes in this is Claiborne was a soldier. He had to follow orders.
Here's the thing about Claiborne, right? Now, if you've read anything by John Brown Gordon, okay, he's a lot different, okay. But after the war, he became very, let's put the country back together again. Yeah. He wanted the military governors out of the South. Admittedly, he did. He wanted the Democrats to take election again. He wanted the South to rule themselves, but he wanted the country to get back together again. When he finished the Senate for the second time, before he died, he went on a speaking tour, which basically was in the North, which is he came as far up here as Vermont to bring everything back together again. I think Claiborne would have been of that ilk to do. And Claiborne should be a guy who the Confederates to this day should embrace, because he kind of represented everything that really they were fighting for in a lot of ways. He had his emancipation issue that he wanted to do. Yeah. He was a fighter. I've always said the Irish ceiling was going to hit him. He wasn't going to get anything further than division. I get that. But I've never read anything that Gordon specifically mentions Claiborne, but he talks a lot about Claiborne types in his memoirs and books written about him. And he's somebody who I think should be embraced a lot more and not just arbitrarily thrown in the trash like people on social media do because he fought for the other side. And that's look, that's the problem.
My opinion is that it's very unfair to throw it away like that, to just say that it was like, you know, oh, look at him, he's stupidly charged at like one of the worst charges. What's he supposed to do? If you're going to use that type of logic, put that on Hooker at Marye's Heights, because Hooker looked at that position and said, my men are going to die. And he still had to do it. If he disobeyed order, he would have been court-martialed.
I don't hear anybody shitting on Grant for attacking the Cold Harbor.
No.
Losing 7,500 guys in 15 minutes. I mean, but that's the reality of it. But you pick and choose. But I think that was more of a rogue rogue stupidity, I think, on social media stuff. But I think regardless, I think there are people that, if you're in the North, there are people in the South you can study and feel okay about without feeling like you're touching some third rail thing.
You should never, whether you fall on either side, you should, if you kind of lean towards the South, you should never feel guilty for studying somebody in the North, like a David Ireland or whatever, and admiring them, and other way around. Like, I mean, I've been made to feel guilty by more than a few people for studying somebody like Pat Claiborne, for studying somebody like John Brown Gordon, it's like, I don't agree, that doesn't mean I agree with why they're fighting. It's just, they're an interesting study. Claiborne is especially interesting because he, I don't know, he's the best they had. And I think it's really unfair to say, oh, he stupidly charged or whatever a position. He didn't have a choice. And the book, which I'm going to put the name of it in the chat, because Frank was just arguing, or sorry, arguing. Frank was arguing. Frank was just asking what the title of the book was. And again, this is all like these are from primary source documents, and their accounts of what led up to the Battle of Franklin, what happened after. There is one account that says some of Claiborne's last words were not just like, if we were to die today, Governor, let us die like men. But more of his last words were, my men are about to be murdered, and I'm going to go be murdered with them.
More importantly, this one's much better.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, I remember, God, yeah. It's so funny as the youth, as you get a little older. I remember being at Gettysburg and somebody giving me shit. Lincoln was a tyrant, and I'm pissed off. And I don't give a shit anymore. I don't, because what, people are going to think what they're going to think, and that's fine. But like the guy who gave you a hard time at Joshua Chamberlain's house, right, last fall, people are going to think what they're going to think. People can say whatever the hell they want, and God bless you. Think whatever the hell you want to think. If you want to think, but just study, because if you study it, you might come around on both sides. And like I've said a million times, there are two teams on this on this war. It'd be kind of lame if there was only one, right? And so that's the way that is. But that's pretty funny though.
But yeah, it was interesting to read the stuff on both sides that was being said on social media. And I just felt like it was kind of downplaying the tragedy that was Franklin, that these guys who are charging that ill-fated position, they don't have a choice. They've been given orders by their commander.
None of them do.
And if they don't, and it's the same on both sides, Mary's Heights was a terrible position.
How would Histerland Claiborne, if he's told to go charge Opdyke and he pulls out his fuck this card, I ain't doing this, right? I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, you want to look at how how people. You want to look at Kennesaw Mountain, right? How McCook, if he said no, I'm not charging Kennesaw, I'm not charging Cheatham Hill, which by anybody with half a brain says, you know what, I'm calling in sick today for this one. Are you out of your freaking mind?
Oh, Cheatham Hill is the same thing.
But there's a lot of that, and so I don't know. I mean, I guess everybody has their favorites, everybody has their villains, but sometimes it's fun to study the other sides, because sometimes when you study the villains, you realize they're not as bad as you think they are, and it gives you a little more of that worldly 360-degree view that you can make a much more informed opinion on this stuff. And it's your opinion. Don't everybody tell you your opinion's
right,
wrong.
Nobody's wrong, but it gives you a perspective. It shows you that you can't paint everybody in the South with a broad brush, just like you can't paint everybody in the North with a broad brush.
But Gordon talks a lot in his memoirs. He says how bring the country together again. But really, it wasn't until the Spanish-American War in 1898 that brought the country back together again. Because he kept saying during his later days, he kept saying, what we need is a new war where we can fight on the same flag. Until that happens, it's never going to happen again. That's kind of what was the first time that kind of brought it back together again, was that. But what happens is the country went through a reconciliation for a long time. And it seems like this last 10, 15 years, the shit's going out the window again.
Yeah.
And that's what's weird about it is a lot of the stuff that was talked about now has been settled 100 years ago, but people just don't realize it's been settled.
It rehashes again. Civil War Project's on here, and they said Cheatham, Forrest, and Claiborne all protested the attack, but Hood ordered it anyway. Some think because of his declining health, and some for revenge for his mistakes at Spring Hill the night before. I think too, it's desperation. He's getting told by Jeff Davis. Well, we don't know for sure, but could Jeff Davis have been like, you need to do this. This is like the last ditch effort. But yet,
soldiers follow orders.
And that's what Claiborne, the one
and
thing
that's what he did.
Yeah.
Whether you agree with it or not. I mean, you want to, James Kemper followed orders to pick his charge, right?
Yep.
Elon Farnsworth followed orders on July 3rd at Gettysburg. Emory Upton followed orders in Spotsylvania. You pick one. That's what you do. So to sit there and say Claiborne was stupid for attacking Upton, what was on his mind? Come on, man. Come on, man. It's like ESPN
no, but that is
not
right? That's not a fair assessment, because he had no choice. He can't, like you said, he can't just protest this, and they were, and he was putting his men in such a way that he hoped it would help protect them a little bit more. But then he's also having to do the whole go out in front of them. The interesting thing about this book that you got me is that it talks about, there is one account of a guy who actually lived that said Claiborne was on his horse when he was shot, and he was trying to get the horse up over the ditch, like up over just to get to where the Union were. And that's when he was hit. And and then the horse got hit, and the horse and he both fell pretty close to each other, apparently.
Yeah.
But that was the third horse he was on that day, because his main horse was, one of his main horses was called Stonewall, which either Claiborne had a wicked sense of humor and knew he was being called Stonewall of the West by that point, or it's just a strange coincidence.
Who knows?
But he was on 3 horses, got shot from under him. Govan saw him going away with his horse, with his sword raised, heading off. But they say that somebody gave him a horse, and that's when he started.
I mean, you want to, what's he going to say? I mean, talk to AP Hill about disobeying orders. Where that guy talk to Fitzjohn Porter.
Someone mentioned Fitzjohn Porter
about what happens if you disobey orders. See how that works out for you.
Right?
Yeah,
that's what Jason said. Look what happened to Fitzjohn Porter for not obeying orders at Second Manassas.
He got put. You want to put in the freaking doghouse, Mary. God, probably would have been bad. Actually, probably good for him though. Probably had that for his livelihood. Probably worked out best. But that's the reality you're living in now. But that, I don't know though. But that's just people who
Yeah. But it's like, there's nothing wrong with looking closer at this and saying, like, you know what, these guys, like, this was a terrible thing that happened. But yeah, Kennesaw's the same thing. Like, George Henry Thomas said to Sherman, this is a bad idea. And Sherman's like, nope, we're doing it. What were those men supposed to do?
No, I mean, that's the whole stupid thing. And again, I'm going to try to bring this back to Dahlgren.
We don't always have to. These are like,
but no, I will say, because that goes back to those following orders, right?
Yeah.
If Dahlgren, who grew up in the military, was a military guy, but his father John Dahlgren was the Dahlgren gun admiral. He was a big deal. Of course, he's going to follow orders.
Yeah.
Now, I think where the train went off the track with old Ulrich, which got a great name, by the way, Ulrich Dahlgren. How cool is that? And he got caught up in the moment with his men, with destroying a lot of stuff, and I think that screwed him up. But I think if those were his plans, I think he would have tried to assassinate Jeff Davis or die trying. I think he would have, because the letter to his father, he talks about it. He doesn't talk about what he's going to do, but he talks about this grand raid that he's going to either be a hero or give up the ghost trying. Of course, a paraphrase, but that's what he says, and that's what he does. So whatever the hell that plan was, whoever authorized it, he was going to do it. And we got to talk about Martin Robinson, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, this is the dark side of.
Well, I mean, this just goes to show. I mean, before you wax poetic on Ulrich Dahlgren about this stuff, that what thing he was going to do, there's the story, and anybody who hasn't listened to the episode doesn't know the Dahlgren story. He's being assigned to go towards Belle Isle. But the way he's being sent to Goochland County it's through woods and small roads. He needs a guide.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a black guy named Martin of Robinson. He's a member of the BMI, the Bureau of Military Information, and he's a Union sympathizer from Goochland County.
Yeah.
He's gonna basically take them all the way through the county to the James River and show them the fords to cross. Okay, he's a guide. But what happens is, because they get stuck raiding those houses, Dover and Eastwood, and James Snedden's house, right? they get stuck behind the weather and they can't cross because the James River, which is usually easy to cross, is flooded, it's swollen. So he feels, so they all get to the James River and they're stuck. He blames Robinson for screwing him, saying that he's some kind of Southern sympathizer and he set them up. And he pulls the reins off of Robinson's own horse and hangs him with him on the side of them, right by the river.
That is just such a brutal.
And even his men cannot believe it. And then they leave him there. They don't cut him down.
Yeah.
And it turns into a really ugly situation. And he really overreacted. But it's a snapshot into his psychology. So when you hear the story of that, I mean, is it hard to stretch that he would kill Jefferson Davis?
Yeah.
No, he would have. Of course he would have.
No, I completely agree. He would have. Like, it's not, it's a crazy order, but I think this is Dahlgren we're talking about.
I mean, this guy is kind of like a male fembot, right?
Now I'm picturing that. Oh my God.
He's just trained to kill. That's what he was. And he was going to do it. But that situation with his guide is so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it still is a real dark spot on his record, because at that point, I mean, he's the Spalding Smales of the Dahlgren family at that point. His father was, you think of guys like Gideon Wells, but John Dahlgren, he's David Dixon Porter, and David Farragut, he's up there in the top echelon Navy guys, and he's probably higher than all of them if you think about it. And for his son to murder a black BMI agent, is really something that really gets glossed over.
Oh, it does. And I think that is part of the reason, in my opinion, that's part of the reason why this is not talked about, because this is super bad PR for the North, especially the Lincoln administration and the Army of the Potomac.
Well, can you imagine when this whole thing blows up, the PR disaster this thing must have been?
Oh yeah.
I mean, the whole point, the whole thing was stupid really from the beginning, but they must have had a little buyer's remorse when this thing fell apart. I bet you when Kilpatrick came back with his freaking dick between his legs and after getting Wade Hampton slapping his ass the whole way back.
Wade Hampton must have been living rent-free in Kilpatrick's head by the end of the war.
Oh, he was. But I think they must have realized, crap, this was a bad idea, Gene's skit here from the beginning. Yeah. And Dahlgren is wired to do these acts. And even if he, with his oakum and his turpentine, he's going to burn Richmond, which is okay, fine. How the hell is that going to look with 500 guys? He's not going to do it anyway. The whole thing is so ridiculous. But in the that news must have hit Lincoln like at the worst time, and he got bailed out hard by Grant and Overland. Oh, bailed out, because if Overland if that wasn't going to happen till later, that would have festered in the Union newspaper for a while. Yeah. Because the story of Dahlgren's body we have to talk about too, right?
Oh yeah.
So Dahlgren's going to get shot. He's going to be killed. He's going to hit 5 times, including one in the head. He's going to die where they're going to run into a Virginia cavalry, the 9th Virginia Cavalry. And so what's going to happen is he's going to be shot and he's going to die. And all his men are going to take off and they're going to run away. And 135 are going to be captured. But when they find those notes, okay, there's a kid, his name is Little Page, a 13-year-old kid, part of the militia. He's rummaging the body. He finds the note about the assassination. And they dig his body up. And they cut off his finger and steal his ring. Yeah. And his body, he was naked, wearing one sock, because we got one leg, so that makes sense. And they took his body, they took his leg, his wooden leg, and they put it in a department store window to display it.
That is like
they took the rest of his body. They displayed the rest of his body in a railroad station for all to see. And there was talk about how his red hair and his red goatee and his pale skin with a look of sheer agony in his face. That's what they said his body looked like. And Elizabeth Van Lew, that famous spy,
crazy bad.
Always back to the spies, MJ, right?
Yeah.
She's going to find out about it, and she has that spy ring around Richmond, and she's going to arrange to have his body dug out of Oakland Cemetery and returned back. But when the North found out what they did to his body, now you've got outrage in the North, outrage in the South. This is a dogs and cats living together mass hysteria situation on both sides. So Lincoln must have been like, God, I need this like I need a hole in the head. right? That's probably what he
Hashtag
felt.
too soon.
But for reality, though, that's kind of what happened. You had a two-front war politically, PR side wide on both sides. So good, thank God over what happened, because this would have been a thing that would have gone on through 1864. And then this poor John Dahlgren, who was sitting down in Port Royal, South Carolina, the whole Robert Smalls thing, that's where he is. And he must have face palmed so many goddamn times. He takes over from Samuel DuPont, and now this thing's all going on.
Yeah.
So there's so much stuff going on, the press, the media, the elections going on. And this is the stuff that doesn't get reported because you focus on the battles and the wars.
Yeah, you're focusing on the bigger things. You don't realize like the far-reaching effects this has. There's some good comments in the chat here.
Yeah.
Caleb said Dahlgren gun is still used today in the U.S. Navy, only by a different name. Ski mentions there's a Navy base in KG named after Dahlgren. Lots of his naval artillery pieces on display there. MJ said Claiborne was the best the Confederates had, in her humble opinion. We would agree with you. Mm-hmm. Civil War Project mentions there's the six Confederate generals who were died from their wounds suffered at Franklin. So Claiborne, Granbury, States Rats, just Adams, Adams was killed in action. Interesting story about Adams is he was actually one of the.
This is a different John Adams, by the way.
Yeah, different. There's way too many John Adams. So they find his body. And then as they're wheeling him back in the ambulance, someone comes up to them and said, "Oh, hey, I just found Claiborne." So they go over and they put Claiborne in the ambulance with John Adams, and they get wheeled back to, they're laid out at Carter House on the porch.
They're laid out on the porch, and their bodies are like cordwood laying out there.
Yeah. And then Carter died 10 days later from his wounds.
Yeah. No, I mean, you think about it, but in States' Rights, just obviously Hiram Granbury, one of the best hairstyles in the American Civil War, no question about that.
He is the kid that you combed their hair before grade 2 picture. And right before the picture's taken, like he's looking all nice and stuff, he just goes like this and messes up his hair like he doesn't give a fuck.
Well, you're going to lose Otho Strahl, John Adams, States' Rights, just Patrick Claiborne. You're going to lose all those guys, Hiram Granbury, and then you're going to continue on to Nashville anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, someone needs a new agent, if you're John Bell Hood, because that was Franklin is a absolute bloodletting. And like I said, we've said this before, almost anything in the West after Atlanta is after the horses have gone out of the barn already. But that unnecessary death of Franklin, the bloodletting that took place there is just tragic. It just does.
Yeah, and that's why I don't like it when it's put to this thing, what happened this week. It's kind of put down to this stupid charge and all this other stuff. And these guys were being idiotic at this point. It's like, that is not what Franklin was. Franklin was, in my opinion, probably one of the most tragic battles in the Civil War that didn't have to happen at all.
Yeah.
And Frank said, so that means Claiborne rode Stonewall. That's either symbolic or that Claiborne was better than Jackson.
Oh gosh.
Caleb said he thinks that some of the defeats in the South had in the Western Theater that would have been way worse had it not been for Claiborne. And MJ mentions, this is a really good point. In my view, to be an objective historian, true to telling the history, you need to study both sides. Absolutely.
Well, that's the whole point of it, though. I mean, if you're first of all, if you're only studying one half, you're missing half the fun because there's so much to study. But two, you learn more about your side by studying the other side.
I know.
In a lot of cases, right? I mean, you just have to do it.
Yeah. Civil War Project. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's the whole point of it. Well, how the hell can you honestly expect to just? Are you gonna tell me you want to be a Civil War historian?
Yeah.
But you're only going to study one half. Well, that doesn't make any freaking sense.
You can't. I don't think you can do that. You have to do it, and you have to do it objectively, and you have to be able. If you have a favorite, you have to be able to point out their flaws as much as what was good about them. Civil War Project mentioned Carnton House, where they were.
No, why would you say Carter? It's Carnton.
I said Carter. Yeah, Carnton. Yeah.
Carnton.
Caleb said Kilpatrick had some pretty rad sideburns.
Well, he's not quite Alpheus Williams level of perfect hairstyles. He's pretty close. He had the good bushy ones though.
Oh, Gentili's on here. He rode his pony over.
Chantilly. At least I know my nightmare is going to be about tonight now. But that's the reality. You got to you got to study the whole thing, and you got to be. And the other thing too is you got to be objective about the whole thing too. You just have to be. I mean, it's fun studying this Dahlgren affair when you look at it, and you can. How what are you not supposed to imagine the outrage in the South after this? You're supposed to.
I completely understand. If I was Jeff Davis, I would have been livid, and it makes sense that there's all of a sudden an uptick in assassination attempts, like on Lincoln, or not attempts, but written ones or whatever. How they found out about them through the BMI or however they did that. That there's going to be more of that, but that is like the gloves are off moment. But just the stuff that doesn't get talked about, like the Robinson incident as well with the hanging, and how bad of PR this was. So yes, Oberlin comes along, but then the other thing that happens a few months after this is Monocacy, right? This is when Early's making his bid for Washington. Like, I'm going to go take that city for a day.
Well, you have the port. You mentioned Mobile. You got the ports that are slowly closing now.
Yeah.
You've got, obviously at that point Sherman's done his thing. The vice is tightening on the Confederacy there. But you study this war. The only way the Confederacy was ever going to win was by lack of will. And there's always that formula that to win a war, it's will times might, and when one of those two equals zero, that's how you lose a war. The Confederacy was never going to win on might because it was impossible. You just weren't going to. You had to win by will. So they were doing a lot of the right things along the way. But the North knew this too, and by sanctioning this idiotic Dahlgren raid, it certainly doesn't help when you think about it. Because at that point, you're being told that you're fighting this war, to free the slaves and to keep the country together, and you're the virtuous side, and these are rebels. And then you're sanctioning assassination. It goes against that. That's why you can imagine. That's why I cannot imagine Lincoln knew about this. It just can't.
No, I
just can't. It just because it goes so. This is a guy who said malice towards none, right? How the hell? Maybe I'm being naive to this. I just can't imagine that something like this would have started there, and that's why I think this goes to Stanton. I
completely agree. It goes to Stanton because what I've read about Lincoln and all that, and just I know it's a scene from the movie, but it's taken from some of the stuff that he said. Let him up easy. I don't think this is the guy that would have been like, go kill Jeff Davis and let's end this now, because Lincoln knew the bad PR behind it. He knew how bad that would look. So I think this is on Stanton. There's a couple other good comments here too. Caleb said, honestly, most Americans know very little of the Western theater, which you and I would definitely agree with, minus Shiloh and maybe Vicksburg. It's important to keep the history alive. We are the ones assigned to this task. And Jason said, I wish more emphasis was placed on Franklin. Most don't know, discuss, or mention that the Confederate charge at Franklin was larger, longer, and diddlier than the Pickett's charge at Gettysburg.
It was. I mean, Gettysburg, it's the biggest battle ever in the Western Hemisphere. It was a big political battle. It was outside of Washington. It was at a time when really the war was in doubt in a lot of cases, by just, to a lot of people. I get the whole Gettysburg thing, and Gettysburg has always been my favorite battle. But I think the thing about Franklin always got me was it doesn't get the publicity, because the war, the eyes of the war were on the East at that point, because that's where everything was going. Sherman had gone east. You had everything going on with the Army of the Potomac, Army of the Virginia, and everything was shifting. But it seemed like it was a battle that took place, that it was such an unnecessary battle. Now, the thing about it, and we said this before, was Hood might have been better off at hitting Sherman going through Georgia than going to Nashville and cutting off the supply line. But of course, he doesn't know that Sherman's going to live off the land. So in their mind, taking Nashville again, taking that Confederate capital, Nashville, that first state that fell, the state capital, would have been a big deal. And then connecting with Lee. But it just seemed like it was so ill-fated. But again, we're looking back 160 years with the knowledge of what happened. And that's the problem. But it just seemed like by the time Franklin happened, it just seemed like it was so unnecessary. And that goes to Davis because he would have sanctioned something like that. Hood's not going to be doing this on his own. He has orders, and
Exactly.
but that they rolled the dice. They thought in their mind this was the way to do it, but they were barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah, well, I think it was, it's Hood and Davis who are rolling those dice. I don't think, and this is who you've got to remember, there's these guys that are under Hood, Cheatham and Claiborne, and the others that are not, they're not in complete agreement with what is going on. And they know when they get to Franklin, it's going to be murder, and they have to do it. And the other thing too is, like, I hear a lot when it comes to Franklin that they're like, oh, this is like, these men must have got there and thought, oh wow, this is like Pickett's charge. None of those men fighting at Franklin were at Gettysburg in the South. They've been in the Western Theater, unless there's some, oh no, wait, Hood's guys, but they were not, they wouldn't have seen Pickett's charge, right?
No, not that. No, I don't think so. They wouldn't have been.
But I think, I think what those men thought when they got there was, oh shit, this is like Cheatham Hill, but we're on the wrong side right now. That they're already dug in, they're entrenched.
There's definitely a heavy focus on Gettysburg, and justifiably so. In a lot of cases, there are. It just you can't deny the fact that it's the biggest battle in the Western. You just can't. But again, you have to look at the other stuff that happened too. There is that mentality. There are people here that the Battle of Bunker Hill was only battle in the Revolutionary War in Boston here, and it's you focus on your battle, but a lot of the stuff went into it. And I think if you really want to know Gettysburg, study the preamble battle, study Second Winchester. If you want to know Gettysburg, study Second Winchester. But that's not unusual. But that's how it is. But there's definitely a I don't want to say inferiority complex towards the West, but people out there, especially in Vicksburg, who realize that Vicksburg is more militarily important. It certainly was. And truth be told, we're talking about Dahlgren's raid here. It's a drop in the bucket compared to Grierson's raid.
Oh yeah,
of Vicksburg.
Grierson.
But again, this is Dahlgren's raid, a la Gettysburg, is more of a political raid versus Grierson's raid, like Vicksburg, is more of a military raid. So so it doesn't mean one's better; they're just different sides of the coin, and that's the Vicksburg versus Gettysburg, conundrum.
That's the people like that. When Gettysburg is happening in the 160th, which Caleb said he's looking forward to that. We're going to be there for that too. That it's going to be all about Gettysburg, but Vicksburg still deserves the attention too, and so do all these other battles. Admittedly, I am still a Western theater person. I've always gravitated towards that theater of the war, even though Gettysburg is my favorite battlefield to visit. It's still one of my favorite battlefields. I am Western theater because I think that's where the strategy is. That's where the key cities are. You have Vicksburg, and then you have Chattanooga, and then you have Atlanta, and then you have Savannah. And that's where a lot of it's I don't know, Western theater is still my favorite, but I still love Eastern as well.
So before, if you want to look at on a football analogy, the Western theater is the lineman, the offensive versus defensive line, and the Eastern theater is the quarterbacks and the receivers. They get all the press, they get all the flashy names, but the war was won in the West. It really, really was.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think you can win at Antietam or win at Gettysburg and still win the war either. So it's not like they're completely overrated. They're just different. The closer you get to Washington, the more political these battles are, as far as that will we talk about, the will to win. Versus in the West was the Union kind of putting the screws to the Confederacy to beat them militarily. But a win at Gettysburg would have been a huge step in the right direction for that will part of it. We watched Copperhead, the movie, a few weeks ago. Right?
I love Copperhead. Anybody who's not seen Copperhead, watch Copperhead. Great movie.
And so we talk about how a lot of people, and the movie takes place in Maine, and why does my family who lives up here in rural Maine give a shit about a war taking place in Virginia, and why we can live our own, they can live on their own, who cares? And there was a lot of that. And it's the movie's really, really good. It's fun. You have to be, in my opinion, you got to be a real Civil War guru fan to appreciate it. Otherwise, it's not going to make any sense to you.
Honestly, I loved it the first time we watched it, but my second time through, last week was I liked it even more. It just
It,
because you've already seen it, so you kind of know the story more, so you can look for more detail in it. It was
it
just
gives
really
you
interesting.
it gives you a snapshot into, you know, a portion of the town in, you know, not, you know, a very patriotic, wanted to put the South's dick in the dirt, versus the other part saying, who cares? Why are we doing this? And the politics and the social fighting that's taking place in the town.
Yeah.
And it's a different aspect of a war that I think a lot of people don't really appreciate.
And it's a northern perspective too that is not talked about a lot. No. And it shows that not all of the North was in support of the war.
Well, the same thing in the South, Free State of Jones, right? Same, not everybody. I mean, this was not a civil war; it was a sectional war. It really was. But it just goes to show that, you know, it gives. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And, you know, shoot us a message. You know,
that's your homework. Is go watch Copperhead, which David said he really enjoys that movie too. Gentili said the ghost of Stoughton. Am I getting that right? Had a store butt after the Mosby Fairfax raid anniversary this past week.
You know, Stoughton is a member of the All Punchable Face team, by the way. He's up there with Alfred Pleasanton on one. He just is. He has that shit eating grin on his face, which makes the whole Mosby affair, you know, even funnier when you think about it. Just
and Caleb mentions that he picked up a book on Franklin called 5 Tragic Hours. Is anyone familiar with it? Yeah. I've read parts of it. I really like it.
I think we have it somewhere around here.
We do, yeah. There's some in that study Franklin that do not like that book, but I personally really like it. And then there's a book, it's in the Emerging Civil War series. It's about Franklin. And
this is a Wiley Sword now, is it? You're going to get Joe Reach.
No, it's not written by Wiley Sword. It's not written by Wiley Sword. No, there's another book about Franklin in the Emerging Civil War series, which is really good too. And like all books in the Emerging Civil War series, it includes a car tour. But I mean, I'm the type of person, and you're this way too, Darren. And I think a lot of people are like this on here as well. Like, you read as much as you can to get the different opinions, because if you only read one author, you're going to get that author's take on the history. You know, you need to read a lot because everybody interprets the primary sources differently. Everybody uses primary sources and excludes some, you know, to further whatever it is they're trying to get across. So that's why it's important to read as much as you can about these battles and about these people.
No.
Jason said, who was it here? There was someone that said that Jason or Jaron said he's going to be at the Gettysburg 160th as a reenactor.
Oh, very cool.
And Frank is also going to be coming to the 160th.
Is he?
Yes.
Well, we have to think about a game plan. Now, since, you know, we did the hangout there over at Fourscore a few weeks ago, right? But I think with everything going on during the day, we need to do it.
We're going to do one at the mine.
So we're going to do it at the mine. I think what we're going to do is we're going to set up a hangout, just a froth up at the Reliance Mine one of the nights. So we'll pick a night. We'll do that, and because I think a lot of cool people are going to be in town for that, and that obviously will be a big Gettysburg thing. Speaking of Gettysburg, real quick, I know we're going to talk about this real quick. But our next episode, Mary, we're gonna have our friend Wayne Motz on with us.
We are, yeah.
We're gonna be hanging with Wayne, talking about the Gettysburg Foundation, which will be cool. We'll do that next week. The same day we'll do that, and then we do our trivia an hour later. So we'll be down. So everybody knows Wayne. He former head of the Civil War Museum in Harrisburg, battlefield guide. He's in charge of the Gettysburg Foundation now. They got a lot of cool stuff going on in town with a lot of new initiatives. That virtual ticket to the past thing. Of course, they run so many things in town. They're kind of that philanthropic wing of the battlefield. So Wayne will be with us next week to hang with him. So that'll be fun. He's a good dude. So we'll chill with him for a while.
Caleb's wondering if anybody seen the movie The Last Confederate. He's heard it's similar to Copperhead, so that's another one to look out for. Andrea Quinn mentions fictional book Widow of the South is a good book on Franklin too, which we've had a few people tell us that, so I think we need to read that. AQ said she's also going to be at the 160th. Skis in for the mine. He's got the shirt.
Oh, he did get the shirt. I was going to ask about that.
And there's someone here, Charlie, he's listening live to us from the Antietam National Cemetery.
Oh, that's a great battle. That's a great cemetery right there. That's a solemn one. And you know, they have a copy of the Gettysburg Address there.
Yeah.
at the Antietam Cemetery. No, we were there 2 Memorial Days ago. I've been there a bunch of times, but that's a great cemetery. It's got a beautiful statue right there in the middle.
Yeah.
Make sure you head over to Antietam Brewery, not far away.
Oh,
from
Antietam Brewery is amazing.
And also make sure you're right around the corner, Charlie. Make sure you go to Shepherdstown and go check out the crossing where Stonewall Jackson crossed.
Yeah,
the river.
And if you're in that area, you can also do AP Hills Spike March.
You got it. You got it. A lot of fun stuff. So that'll be fun. But that'll be a good time. We'll have to figure something out with that. We'll pick a day. We'll pick a time. But I think the mine's probably the way to go.
Yeah, Elsie does mention that the mine was slammed on Remembrance Day, so it might be really busy. So it might have to Caleb said, let's get the copse of trees.
Wow. Last time I saw MJ was at the copse of trees. Myself and Gentili and Jacob Thomas, we were walking Pickett's Charge. There was MJ was waiting for us at the West Wall. She was doing her whole thing. Yep. That was pretty fun.
Bjorn's on here from Abraham Lincoln Bookshop in Chicago,
cool.
Which is a really cool place. He said McDonough and Connolly wrote, he said 5 Tragic Hours. So he's also saying that book is great too. So Bjorn, do you have any other books about Franklin or maybe Dahlgren? Maybe there's a Dahlgren biography out there.
There's a list. I'm sure there's a lot of good ones about that.
Well, Gentili's going to be in. He's going to be in Ireland. Actually, he's going to be in Cork, which I think is close to where Claiborne's from.
Oh, that's right. He's not going to be around, so we'll figure something out. We'll obviously we got some time to figure out, but we'll find out the scoop with that. Kim Riley, she's someone I know who works for the mine, so maybe reach out to her and see if we can figure something out with that. We can always do Foursquare again too. Foursquare's big, but
we'll figure something out. I mean, we got to.
But it'll definitely be at night.
Mm-hmm.
We could, even if the beer garden closes early though, we'll figure something out.
Maybe we'll do a pub crawl or something. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll do something fun. So we'll definitely do some kind of meet and greet for that. That'll be a good time because I think a lot of people are going to come down for that.
Mm-hmm.
But it does make more sense to do something at nighttime because people in the day don't want to do battlefield stuff, and not everybody's like you, likes a day drink, Mary.
Excuse me, you were the one that walked to the fridge this morning at 20 after 9 and was like, I feel like a beer.
I have never. Anyway, so that'll be pretty fun. But we'll have a good time with that.
Caleb said he's going to go to Bragg's grave next week.
Cool. That'll be a lot of fun. We'll definitely look forward to seeing those pictures. Make sure you do a picture. Get a good cigar picture with old Braxy.
I don't think Caleb wants to take a cigar picture.
Yeah, who knows? You never know. I mean, he had his moments. He has moments, right?
God. I guess Bragg did have some good moments, but
sure he did. He had Chickamauga.
That's
right?
True.
Chickamauga.
Sort of, kind of.
Well,
I'm actually doing one of my projects for my master's degree on Chickamauga. I'm writing it's called a library guide. So for anybody that wants to learn about the Battle of Chickamauga, I'm going to be writing a guide for that with just different sources. So like books, journal articles, like videos, photos, all that stuff. And it was funny when I went and proposed it to my professor, she was like, I've never heard of that battle before. And I said, I'm like, that's exactly why I'm going to make a library guide about it.
No, you mentioned a little while ago, the Western Theater is definitely the redheaded stepchild. Again, Dahlgren, redheaded. See what they're there?
Yeah.
Why does every crazy guy in the North have red hair, by the way?
Sherman?
So bad. But there is some cool stuff to study with that. But for the most part, we'll definitely have we'll definitely plan something with that. But that'll be cool. That'll be cool. And then not since we're making episodes after Wayne, then we have MJ coming up with us.
We do, yes. She will be talking about. She's going to be we are going to be talking about the life of Pauline Cushman, and we're also going to be talking about MJ does living history. We're going to be talking about her experiences with doing that as well. Bjorn mentions Eric Jacobson and Richard Rupp wrote a book about Franklin called For Cause and Country, and it's probably the best book that features new sources and ideas. For anybody on here looking for a book about Franklin, For Cause and Country. And actually, that's a book we need to get to. I've been wanting to read that one.
No, there's a lot of good stuff. Franklin is definitely I remember when we recorded that. that was a brutal one to record because
It
there's
was,
so much human loss in that.
yeah,
And as you're talking about the Battle of Franklin, you have to catch yourself and sit there and go, why?
yep,
You know, you get the overall point of stopping Schofield from getting over the river and getting back to Nashville to join Thomas to combine those armies. But it just, and again, when you have the benefit of 160 years to look back and study and analyze the stuff, I mean, speaking of, Gettysburg, it's people are, they argue the silliest things about that, about every little aspect of that battle.
yeah,
But it's the same thing when you look at the overall big picture of a battle.
yeah.
And anyone who really dissects and analyzes the Battle of Franklin, you have to catch yourself and just sit and say, it just seems like it was such an unnecessary thing at the time. Because I have to think, even at that point, the only people who didn't know the war was over were the politicians. And they were the ones,
That's my thoughts,
right?
is that Davis is putting a lot of pressure on Hood, but Hood is also a fighter and he's going to be like, yeah, I'll do it. Whereas I think somebody like Hardee or Cheatham or even Claiborne would have questioned, why do we need to do this right now? The reason I say that about Hardee is because, and I've mentioned this a few times on here, is because of how he just was like with Savannah. He was like, you know what, let's just give it to Sherman because there's been enough. And I honestly think the thing that factored into it, and this is going back to the fact that these guys are human, is he read about the Battle of Franklin. He read that his best friend had been killed and he was like, we're done. Like, we cannot fight for, like, we can't put up a fight for Savannah because this is over.
Well,
And I think that says a lot right there about how Hardee would have reacted to Davis saying, like, I think you need to, go try and take Nashville.
It just makes sense to me that people should spend more time worrying about why the Battle of Franklin happened instead of worrying where James Smith's friggin' guns were placed at Devil's Den.
Yeah.
Because those, speaking of the mine, that's where those conversations happen. 99 Pennsylvania monuments up on the top of the hill where Smith's guns were, vice versa. But those are the conversations you have versus, what about Franklin? There's a lot of people that get the Franklin thing, but I think people, you're right. People do focus a little too much on the Eastern Theater, especially Gettysburg compared to the other ones. It doesn't minimize Gettysburg. It's just, I think if you expand that concentric circle out to include the West, there are bigger fish to fry if you're going to have these debates, right?
Oh, I agree. And yeah, regarding our episode on Franklin, it was probably the toughest one to record because of, like, as you're recording, you're like, wow, this actually happened. But to edit it and go back and listen to it, that was the one where I actually had to get up and, like, I would, go walk around and I had to take a break from it because it was like, I can't believe, this actually happened. And I mean, any battle is tragic, but for some reason about Franklin, and that's why I kind of got riled up earlier this week about what I saw, like how it was kind of basically saying,
yeah, you felt a little dangerous that day. Kind of
well,
tough to be around you.
That's not. It was just to say that Claiborne was stupid for doing the charge. It's like he doesn't have a choice. He's in the same position that Hooker was in at Marye's Heights.
No, I don't know, but again, it depends. It depends on who you read. I mean, you could
Yeah.
read a venomously anti John Bell Hood guy in Wiley Sword, which is no surprise. Joe hates him, but you could read someone like him versus some other sources on Franklin that tell a different story too.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is Franklin was unnecessary. It just, but again, at that time it didn't seem unnecessary because at that point you get past Schofield, you beat Thomas in Nashville, you would take that capital again. You're shutting down the Union supply line again. So maybe that stalls the East by doing that. But they just did. But again, that's the whole problem with it. It's sad because they didn't know that it didn't matter. They were fighting a battle that wasn't going to change the outcome.
But I think, I think the subordinate generals like Claiborne, like Cheatham, maybe even just and Claiborne did not like each other, which is kind of ironic. They know that Franklin is going to be murder. And that's what Claiborne said. Like, some of his last words were, we attribute them to being, if we were to die today, let us die like men. But another one was, if my men are to be murdered, then so am I. And that's how he saw that charge, was murder. And I think he's one of the ones talking. He's like, no, I don't want to do this.
Well, you have a whole bunch of experience, situations. You look at Charles Mudge, second mass. They knew. Yep. He literally said it's murder, but it's an order. You know you have to attack, but you have no say in it. So yep. It's the same concept. Duty and soldiers and men, and that's you do what you do. You do your job, right?
Yeah.
So you can't question those individual subordinates for doing it when they literally had no choice. That was literally what they had to do.
Yeah.
Whether or not we look back 100 plus years later and realize it was irrelevant, doesn't change the moment. Doesn't change the motif to this whole thing.
No.
No,
it doesn't at all. Then and Jared mentions, the September 20th, like Bragg orders those 2 dawn assaults and Polk ignores that one. That's when he's sitting in the rocking chair. And at the end of the day, it's kind of this victory for the Confederates. But there's Rosecrans and Thomas sitting in Chattanooga, which is the city they need to have. And Bragg had chances, but he just was so at that point, nope.
Well, there's a lot of, that whole thing leading up to that. You've got Cleburne, Thomas Hinman. They fuck up there. They did before Chickamauga.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into it. Chickamauga, they won that. Be honest, because Longstreet and Hood. That's why they won that, right?
Yeah, it was honestly, and I'm not a huge Hood person, but he's good as division and corps. Leading an army, no. That was, I will never understand. I guess Davis needed a fighter and Hardee had been offered, and he's like, nope, I don't want.
You need those corps commanders who are really good at what they do in division commanders. Hancock, right? Or as we call him after late in the war, Ham Hock, right? He's somebody who you cannot deny what he did. Antietam, Gettysburg, because he was a fighter. He had that X factor that created that he was just good at that. How he would have done running a whole army, who knows? But he was good at what he did. Hood was very good at what he did, but he stepped into the big chair, and I don't think he was suited in that.
He was not suited to be Army commander.
The best players don't make the best coaches. I remember Larry Bird coached the Indiana Pacers. Yeah. He was okay, but he wasn't great as he was a player. Sometimes you're better in the role you're in. And if you go above your skis, you go a little bit too deep. Everyone has their limits. Everyone has their ceiling. And I think Hood, his limit was going to be in the position he was heading into that. When he replaced Johnston after Atlanta, that might have been one of the biggest mistakes that Davis made.
I think that was the biggest mistake he made.
Wrong guy, wrong time. Right? Yep. Wrong guy, wrong time.
Hood just was not, in my opinion, I don't know if anybody on here will agree with me. That was like the worst decision ever. He's the one that totally destroys that Army of Tennessee, which it was. Army of Tennessee is interesting to study because it's very screwed up even from the beginning. But you had others that would have been way better in that command. Hardee in particular. I often wonder what would have happened had we kept had they kept Joseph E. Johnson in charge. But again, I guess Davis thinks he needs a fighter, so he's going to put Hood in charge. I wonder what would have happened had Longstreet stayed out there. If Longstreet had been in charge, how would that have gone? But I think too sometimes it depends on the situation that the Army is in. So. Yeah. I think George Meade is the best commander of the Army of the Potomac. I rank him up there with Grant, but he's a very different commander. My favorite general, yes, I'm going to mention him. So everyone take a drink. Oliver Otis Howard is an amazing commander of the Army of the Tennessee. And I will always back Sherman's decision up on that. He is great on the March to the Sea. He's the exact commander that Sherman needed at that time, and he delivers. Could Howard have done something more aggressive? I don't think so. Could Howard have been in Schofield's position or General Thomas's position? I don't think so, and done as good of a job. But
No.
what he was given, the situation he was given on the Atlanta campaign when he took over after Burbsy was shot and killed, unfortunately, and then onto the March to the Sea, suited Howard for the type of person and general that he was.
No, but a lot of these politicians, Lincoln and Jefferson Davis, put these people in positions when it was unfair for them, right? And we said before, Hood probably wasn't the best call. Lincoln put guys like Burnside in charge in the East, right?
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm like.
And he also considered removing Grant after Fort Henry's and Donelson.
Yeah.
So let's not, none of these guys are perfect. They're blindly finding their way through the dark to see what combination works. But at the end of the day, every one of these people, everybody, you, me, everybody has their ceiling of what they're capable of doing. Yeah. Where we get in trouble is going above that ceiling unnecessarily. But again, you got to give the Lincolns and the Jefferson Davises credit for the fact that they had no choice. They had to put at the moment who was in charge. If you're Jeff Davis and you just lost Atlanta and you think that maybe you need an offensive spark to push back, you're going to put a John Bell Hood in. Because who else are you going to put in? Friggin' Beauregard?
I think Beauregard. I've gained a lot of respect for Beauregard.
No, but in hindsight, looking back, Pierre Gustave Beauregard, he might have been the better choice. But at that moment, you just took a left hook. You want someone who's going to throw a right cross. So you're going to put an offensive guy in. As ill-founded as that was historically, you can see the mindset, especially when Jeff Davis and Hood were kind of sort of boys.
Hood is working behind the scenes after he's wounded at Gettysburg. He's working behind the scenes, and he continues this as he's in Army of Tennessee being commanded by Joseph E. Johnston. He's working behind the scenes to pretty much throw Johnston under the bus, even though Hood is like, I think this is a great idea, we're doing this, to Johnston to his face. And then he's writing Davis saying, like, this is what's happening. By the way, I think you should put me in command, kind of thing. He's really working behind the scenes to do this. And Hardee was considered for it, but he was like, no. I personally think Hardee or Beauregard, or Beauregard as we call him, would have been a much better choice, would have made kind of push back against what Davis was saying, because I think they had that military kind of, they would have been like, you know what, I think this might be a better plan. Jaron agrees with you about leadership. He said, leadership is not about being the best. Leadership is about making everyone else better. Best brigade division commander does not equal best commanding general.
And that's the thing that both armies struggle with the entire war, is finding that guy. Now, Lincoln found one in Ulysses Grant. He absolutely did. And Ulysses Grant made Sherman better, right? Mm-hmm. Sherman likely would not have been as good under Meade or under Hooker or under McClellan or Burnside or Pope or McDowell. Pick one. It doesn't matter.
Sherman was he's like Kilpatrick in some respects. He's got to have the right person in command to control him. Not control him, but to like kind of guide him a little bit. The other thing about Sherman too is Sherman never wanted to be in command. He is Grant's, I think he outranks Grant. He's older than him by about a year, but he never wanted the command. And I think Grant knew that. And that's why they worked well together, because Sherman didn't have that ambition. But the other thing Sherman had too, and this is what matters is Sherman had good subordinates as well when he's in the Western Theater. He's got Thomas, he's got Howard, he's got Burbsy, even Blackjack Logan. I really like Blackjack, but he's also got, and I do give credit to Slocum. Slocum is really
he does too. And it's no coincidence that Lee is going to have Jackson, he's going to have Longstreet. Now, obviously, when Jackson goes down, he's going to spread that between A.P. Hill and Ewell, and he's going to lose a little bit there. But you have good. Look at any good NFL coach is going to have good coordinators, and look what happens if you don't have them. Yeah. But when you look at what they had, and that's why we said many, many times, one of those what ifs we'd like to throw around is if Albert Sidney Johnson wasn't killed at Shiloh, how that changes the dynamic in the Western Theater. Now, people will sit there and say, well, Johnson he was not as good as people think he was. He's overrated. But again, if U.S. Grant's killed at Shiloh, who knows what he was not U.S. Grant either at that point. It's what the potential could have been. And when you look at the biohazard dumpster fire of Confederate generals in the Western Theater that came to Johnson, right?
That's why it's called the Army of Misfit Toys.
No, but I mean, you wonder how that could have stabilized. And Johnson was in a shitty position. He had to cover a 1,000,000-mile, line with four guys.
Albert Sidney Johnson is not. He's got this like huge front that he's got to cover, and that must have been tough. And the other thing too is he's having subordinates that are such a shit show to do this stuff that shouldn't even be in the positions that they're in.
The thing too we got to talk about is Davis, right? The South had a significant issue in the first half of the war with just getting ammunition. So what you wanted to do is you wanted to slow the clock at the beginning until they could do that. And a lot of people, if you want to study the Civil War, you want to go into the real deep nerd rabbit holes, look at the ammunition situation in the South. Because they had you had to run. Ted Savas talks about this a lot. You see Ted Savas from Savas Beatty talk about the ammunition in the South. So why why Beauregard gets chained to a desk after retreating out of Corinth by slowing them down the way he does with those Quaker logs was a brilliant retreat for him. Davis didn't quite get it. He didn't get it.
Davis also didn't like Beauregard either, and that's the other issue with Davis is he puts his friends in charge over those that would have been more qualified. And I think it's Larry J. Daniel. I know a couple people on here have read that book about Army of Tennessee. Larry J. Daniel talks about how in the early days of the formation of Army of Tennessee, that people, they're putting the friends in charge in upper level positions that it's kind of like, you probably shouldn't be there. But we're going to give you this. And those that are lower should have the higher positions. Caleb says Beauregard's one of those ones whose record's often overlooked. His defense at Charleston first and Petersburg later in the war.
Big time. I mean, you want to do a what if? What if Beauregard takes over? I mean, don't forget, after the whole fiasco with Shiloh, admittedly, he did his victory dance. He did his icky shuffle after that first day.
Yeah, the part where he writes on the night before, we've got this as a victory.
And he does. But you know what, though? He doesn't know Don Carlos Buell's going to be arriving soon. But regardless, he fights up front. If Beauregard is going to take over after Johnson, I don't know. You could. I think he's very underrated. And the story is he was buried barefoot. And allegedly his ghost still haunts the graveyard for that reason. So who the hell knows why they did that? But
doesn't his ghost also haunt? We were just watching one of those ghost shows where it was there's some place where he haunts that he was like some kind of administrator.
Who the hell knows? But they buried him without his shoes for whatever reason he did, and allegedly his ghost is pissed off.
Wow, Beauregard is another one that
he must have had some of those Bruno Mali shoes. Must have really liked his shoes, but again, he is somebody who was unnecessarily put away and chained to a desk after that whole thing, after Shiloh, after Corinth, after falling back. Because what's he supposed to do at that point? I mean,
exactly.
They probably win the Battle of Pittsburgh Landing, which is what I'll call it if it happens 2 days earlier, if that rain doesn't come and he's able to get there.
The weather really factor into it.
And so that's where you get lucky with this stuff is communication, terrain, and weather. The big three is every battle. That's every one of them includes that. But what happens if he doesn't get slowed down? He's the hero of the West.
Yeah.
Right? And with Johnston, he's a slam dunk guy. And why he didn't take over after Johnson was killed is one of those knee-jerk reactions. And I think that's one that cost him, because you're looking at something, especially Braxton Bragg. And look, he had his moments, but he's not going to be someone who's going to be held upon as one of the glorious Southern commanders historically, because of everything that he experienced, whether it be Chattanooga, whether it be getting pantsed by Rosecrans at Tullahoma. I mean, pick one. But again, there are decisions made that were wrong decisions. It's like a football team firing the coach too soon.
Yeah.
after a bad game. And I always felt Beauregard got a shitty end of the stick with that.
I've always felt that too.
And he, for the most part, he kept his mouth shut. I'm not saying that because he's a good Mason, Mary. I'm not just defending him for that reason.
Mason too?
Oh yeah, of course he is. But I'm not just going to defend him for that reason. But he's somebody who I think would have been was someone who he's that good bullpen pitcher who was left in the bullpen and didn't come into the game and you lost. And I've always felt about Beauregard.
Yeah, I wonder that too about if he had been, if Davis had been like, hey, you can be in charge of Army of Tennessee. I'm getting rid of Joseph E. Johnson. And they kind of switch positions. But Joseph E. Johnson ends up coming back in charge at the end anyway, which I think is a good thing because by that point, Johnson knows who he's up against. He and Sherman know each other so well, even though they've never met in person. So that story is interesting too, that, Lincoln's been assassinated and Sherman's having to go meet with Johnson, and he finds out on the train that Lincoln has been assassinated, and this is his first time meeting Johnson in person, and he's got to go, and the first thing he says is like, okay, I know we're here to negotiate surrender, but we've got a problem.
Well, just think about a small time period where the Union is considering firing Grant and the South did demote Beauregard.
Yeah,
all the same period, and how mind-numbing both of those concepts are. I'm definitely a PGT guy, Beauregard, and I've always felt that. I always felt that he got screwed. I always did. And when he was let out of the doghouse late, it was too little, too late.
It was too late. It was too late. He's down in Savannah with Hardee when Franklin happens and when Sherman comes down there, and it's he and Hardee that I think have to make the decision to abandon the city.
Yeah.
And that I think was a really, on their part, good for them, because I think they read about what happened at Franklin. And I think you can take that into the what if game and apply it to how they would have been as commanders, that they would have been more pushing back on Davis and saying, you know what, I think this is a bad idea. I think we need to go about this differently.
No, he didn't have a lot of pushback, guys. I mean, Davis himself wanted to be on the field.
The other thing about Hood too is Hood I don't think Hood is the type of guy to push back, and that's the problem.
You don't think so? See, I think Hood. I always wonder how Hood might have been if he got a bigger command earlier before his injuries too. The Gettysburg injury,
definitely.
The Gettysburg injury. He's carrying his dead arm.
Yeah,
he doesn't get it amputated. It's just a dead arm. Then he's going to lose a leg later, and he's the Red Knight of Monty Python by the time he gets to Franklin. He just bought
the greatest analogy. I mean, the one that I think of is like Hood had sacrificed himself on the altar of the Confederacy, and he expected his men to do the same thing. Is that is who Hood was. I don't think he would have pushed back on Davis. I think he would have been like, yes, I can. He's kind of the like, yes, we can do this, right? So Bjorn mentions for the Kilpatrick Dahlgren raid, the classic account 8 hours before Richmond by Virgil Carrington Jones, written in 1957, is a good one. Jason mentions Beauregard did excellent work in the early Petersburg battles, and he never gets credit for it.
Beauregard, the thing about him is the problem with Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard is he kept his mouth shut.
Yep.
Right. Is he did everything possible. I mean, he was the one obviously at Fort Sumter.
Yep.
He was somebody who was he was sending cigars and liquor over to Sumter to try to settle everything down. I mean, he was a guy, he was a statesman. And I always, it's so funny. Sometimes I'm sitting at home alone and the power goes out, Mary. I like to think about these things. I think about what would have happened if Davis decided to make himself a general and let Alexander Stephens take over the Confederacy politically. How that would have been. Well, because he always wanted to be a general.
He always wanted to be in the uniform.
And so I always wonder how that might have changed history too. It wouldn't have changed the big picture, but there are little things you think about as you sit around and imagine, as we tend to do with these. We think about how history.
What's fun about this is imagine the what if game, because it's a way of studying this to talk about, you talk about the real. You can still talk about the real history, but then you talk about the what if. So what if this had happened? And you look at what the decisions they made before.
Right. It's not the what if Stonewall was at Gettysburg bullshit. I mean, not
I
that stupid
fucking
crap.
hate that
But
one.
no, that's my big pet peeve too.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those things where it's fun to imagine how it could have been politically with what these guys' aspirations truly were.
Yeah.
But again, it's one of those things where, you know, what the Confederacy did a good job of was putting a lot of good generals in the East, which of course they're going to. But the ones in the West, it was almost like they had a blind spot. They couldn't find. They never did find that guy to replace Johnson. And nobody knows what Albert Sidney Johnson could have been.
Yeah.
And he might have had the Kurt Cobain syndrome where he could have been shitty down the road, but he was
I
great,
honestly,
right?
like, the more I read after reading, I need to, well, I read like most of the Daniel book. I need to go back and finish it. But like, I used to think Albert Sidney Johnson was like, oh, he's the greatest thing the Confederacy had, and then they lost him. But that's going by what Davis said. The more I read about it, I think that he was good, but there was others that were better. I mean, the best that they had overall on both sides, East Western Theater, was Patrick Cleburne. But after that, you have, I think Hardee is really good, Beauregard, even Joseph E. Johnston is good too. He knows how to read the room. He knew how to read Sherman without ever having talked to him in person and recognize that he was a flanking guy. And then at Kennesaw, he's like, this guy's going to full frontal it. And Sherman does, and it screws him over.
No, it just seemed that Davis had a penchant of putting the wrong guy in charge, leaving the best people in his bullpen. And he puts people in the bullpen. You know, taking out Johnson in hindsight was the wrong call to Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Leaving Beauregard, you know, in the doghouse for as long as he did was a bad idea. I don't think Beauregard gets. We call him Beauregard because of figured out.
Yeah, beer.
Right? I don't think he gets enough credit for his withdrawal after Shiloh as he should. The hardest thing you can do militarily is retreat in the face of the enemy. And how he fell back from Shiloh, and especially how he fell back from Corinth, is to keep his army intact when you have limited ammo. And that ammo thing was a real thing. That really was. It wasn't like you had this 100 million mini balls and shells and canister. You had to use them sporadically. And so until later in the war, they didn't have them. So he was able to protect the army and keep everything in place to fight another day. And Davis wasn't having it. And if you want to, I don't want to, victimize anybody, but he's somebody who I think gets the shit end of the stick historically from the Southern perspective. Yep. Because I think everything he got hit with was very unfair. I think the Beauregard hate in the South at the time never made sense to me. It never did.
Same. No, same. He and I know there's a biography about him. I think it's called Napoleon Gray, which I want to read it when I'm on my summer break from doing my master's degree. I really want to read that, but he was Beauregard. When I got into the Civil War when I was like a kid, he was the first general I remember learning about was Beauregard, and his name always stuck with me.
Well, he's got one of the best names in the Civil War, right?
Pierre Gustave
Toutant Beauregard, along with the great, Sterling A.M. Wood, Mary,
who was placed next to Bushrod Johnson at, I think it was the Battle of Pea Ridge or Richmond. I can't remember which one, but I know they were placed side by side in a battle.
No, Philippe Regis de Carendan de Trobriand is the best name in the Civil War by far. De Trobriand is the best name. That is by far the best name. All right, we should ready to shut this off. It's
I was just going to say, yeah.
We got a Bruins game to watch today, Mary. We're going down to one of the local pubs here in town. Yes. The Bruins beat the Red Wings tonight. So this afternoon. So we got some fun planned for fun things afoot at the Circle K for us. So we have, what do we have? We have
Wayne Mott's. Elsie says Krzyzanowski. Yes.
Vladimir Krzyzanowski is that's a good one too. But Trobriand's a good great.
I kind of like, for some reason it's shorter, but I like Von Gilsa.
How about States Rights Gist?
States Rights Gist.
I mean, there's a lot of great Civil War names.
I've been naming your kids States Rights.
How about the other Jefferson Davis? Right?
The
hero of Ebenezer Creek.
Okay, why Jefferson C. Davis was even allowed to continue on after that murder I will never understand.
It's always fun that he put the C in. It's kind of like that actor Michael Jordan, who was in the Rocky movies. They put the middle initial in as a Michael B. Jordan, I think his name. But I always got a kick out of it.
Oh, Jason says Schimmelfennig.
Schimmelfennig is another good one. The Pigman, the conqueror of Charleston. But so we have Wednesday. We have Wayne coming on. We're going to talk about the Gettysburg Foundation. Then we have our trivia night, which will be the same night afterwards, after we get done recording with Wayne. So here's the deal. Dress up in something Irish, okay? And the best costume is going to get a free book, courtesy of the great Bjorn at the Lincoln Bookstore.
We have some books to give away. Yes, Abraham Lincoln Bookshop is the sponsor of our trivia nights.
So we're gonna do a trivia night. We're gonna have some categories. They're all not gonna be Gettysburg, so don't worry. We're gonna have some categories, and we've been done for a couple of years now. We're gonna send out some books. We're all gonna send a book for the best costume. Maybe we should have a book away for we can call it the what the hell can we call it now? We'll think of something maybe for the most inebriated person on St. Patrick.
Oh God, that would be if Ryan shows up. That would be Ryan.
Maybe we have the Ryan. We'll figure something out.
Yeah, Ryan.
But we're gonna do that Wednesday. We're gonna do trivia, and then we'll hang on afterwards for a little while.
Yeah.
So dress in something green. That'll be cool. We'll send you a book, the best one, and the contest will be good.
And we're gonna do our trivia as well. So we do basically. I think it's four rounds of trivia, right? And is the trivia night? Yeah, well, Jason. So it's on. So if actually, so there's one more book to mention here from Bjorn. He said T. Harry Williams' Bio of Beauregard is one of the essential Civil War books that might never be eclipsed. So everyone check that out. I know I'm definitely am going to. Frank said, Caleb, you're dressing up as Claiborne. Chris Caleb said he's going to be a leprechaun. Didn't you do a picture where Claiborne was a leprechaun?
I'm sure. God, who the hell knows at this point? But no. So that'll be fun. It'll be a fun party, festive mood. It'll be a Wednesday night, but it is what it is. But we'll have a lot of fun with that. We'll give away some books, courtesy of Bjorn and the Lincoln Bookshop out of Chicago, and we'll be doing that. It'll be a lot of fun. And then in the following week we'll be joining with MJ. Will be on with us. We're going to talk about Paul Cushman, and then you and I go on vacation, Mary. We get to go. We're going deep behind Confederate lines. We're going to Andersonville and Atlanta and Kennesaw. And we're going to Chickamauga. We're going to have a week. We're going to do the Civil War nerdery to the T. We'll have a lot of fun with that first week in April. So. We have a lot of fun stuff coming up. We have a lot of fun coming up.
And yes, Jason, the trivia is on Zoom 7:30 Eastern. So there's the Civil War Breakfast Club at gmail.com. We've already sent the invites out. So if any of you are regular attenders of that and have not got your invite, email us, Civil War Breakfast Club at gmail.com, and let us know. We'll send you an invite to that.
So it'll definitely be fun. So it's on Zoom. So the way we do it is we ask the questions, we put the questions on the screen, and everybody answers them. And we'll go over the rules. Admittedly, I forget the rules, how we do them, Mary. We've done it a few months, but we usually take the first couple of answers.
I think the first 4 or 5 answers that are legit answers.
Yeah, and so we have fun with that. We pick the real answers, and then we keep tally, and then we'll send you a book courtesy of Bjorn on our Lincoln Bookshop. Yeah. So we've done this a bunch of times now. It's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to get some books. But you know what though, and we make the questions pretty good. We go from neophyte to licensed battlefield guide question level. So we have a lot of fun with that. So we'll test your knowledge on that. So we'll have a good time with that. So keep an eye on your emails and keep an eye on social media for the details. But definitely jump on for that, because that's a lot of fun. We just sit around, we answer the questions. Then when it's all done, we just have a couple of beers.
Yeah, we just hang out. You know, it'll be 2 days before St. Patrick's Day. So
we bring everybody on Zoom. We just hang out and talk and shoot the shit and let everybody talk to each other. But it's a lot of fun. So definitely do it.
Yep. Oh, thank you, MJ. And Jason said always enjoy this. Thanks a ton. Bjorn said great episode, nerds. See you next time. Yeah, thank you, Bjorn, for being on here. MJ said go Bruins and Yankees, and Barbara said the 2 hours went by fast. Yes, they did today. So it was a great.
They always do. So we really appreciate everyone's support, Yankee fans notwithstanding. Yeah. But we have a lot of fun with that. Yeah. But seriously, it's great to do this. I mean, there aren't any places in our lives that we get to talk Civil War stuff and have a lot of fun with it. And I've said before, the Civil War people, the smartest people I know, but they just are. And it's just a great community that's sprung up from this. So we'll have a lot of fun with that, and we'll talk more about some stuff coming up. We got some stuff We're going to talk about Lisa's situation in April. We're going to talk about Lisa Sammy. We're going to talk a lot of good stuff coming up down the pike.
Yeah.
This is going to be an action-packed spring for the Civil War nerd community. So we're going to have a lot of fun with this. So off we go. So any final words from you, Fincheru?
Well, thank you for everybody for coming on with these for these 2 hours this morning, which we went a little bit over the time that we usually do, but clearly that means it was a great discussion. So thank you. Thanks to everybody who just hangs out with us on here, to Bjorn for his book recommendations from Abraham Lincoln Bookshop, because he's the guy to go to for that stuff.
If you're in Chicago, reach out to him and check out his bookstore, because I still cannot believe how awesome that was. Don't visit him. It's a museum more than a bookstore. It's definitely really. Chicago's great anyway, but that book place is if you go to Chicago and you don't go see Bjorn, then shame on you, because you're missing out. You really are.
Yeah, no, it's also Gentili says he's got to go bleach his eyes.
Gentili. Well, you asked for that one, Gentili. Not for nothing,
Tony.
We'll go
And
with that.
AQ says she might be in Plymouth on Friday to visit.
Really? Well,
Yes.
okay. Well, I think that may be St. Patrick's Day. So AQ, just so you know, so we'll look behind the curtain. We're going to be doing some friends of ours do a Plymouth pub crawl on St. Patty's Day here in town. So you are certainly welcome to join us, hit some bars, and go hang out.
Yep.
But if you're
If
around,
earlier, hit us up.
if you're around, we'll go show you the Warren grave over at the cemetery of your Barlow family.
Yeah.
But I got a gift for you though, AQ. I got something I got to give you. So when you come by, hopefully we definitely catch up with you. I got something for you. So,
Yep.
All right. So we are good to go. So
We are.
Mary,
Yep.
as always, the pleasure was all yours. And we will all look forward to talking to you all. So everybody have a great rest of the weekend. We look forward to seeing y'all on Wednesday. Go Bruins, Mary, and we will talk to you all on the other side.
See you guys later.